We'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast was recorded,
and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
and especially to any Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islanders listening today. Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Full Bottle Podcast. I'm your host Gabby, and today I am in Mareeba, Queensland with Citrus Australia Market Development Project Officer Ebony.
Hello! Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm actually in Queensland at the moment with Ebony. We're at the Far North Queensland Rotary Field Days. It's a bit windy, it's been raining. How are you feeling, Ebs?
I'm feeling pretty energetic. It's such an awesome event and we've had so many great people through our stand here today despite the weather.
Yeah, if you hear any it's the wind. It's not Ebony having a snooze. Ebs is here to give me support on this episode since it's going to be a very Queensland-centred episode in Mareeba. And of course, Stephen has gone. If you're listening, Stephen, I hope you're having a terrible time. Ebony, can you tell me a bit about yourself for our listeners and our growers who might not know who you are, what you do?
Sure. So, my name's Ebony. I'm here in sunny Far North Queensland in Mareeba, and I'm a Market Development Project Officer, which pretty much means I provide on-ground support to all of our Queensland growers, but also contribute to all of the amazing Citrus Australia national projects.
Yeah, sounds cool. And we've actually got a fruit sort of display here in our tent at the Far North Queensland Field Days. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I feel like we should thank the growers who have supplied some of this fresh fruit. Who are they, Ebs?
Yes, definitely. We've got some beautiful produce on display here today and for the remainder of the week, and that has come from Galati Citrus, the Carusi family at Turkonnell Valley, and Kamano Farms, Deb and Jose and their daughter Tina. And we've also got some lemons from Vuk Citrus, the Vukanen family.
Thank you so much for, listen, we've had so many people come and grab some fruit and, they're offering us money and we have to, it's hard to say no, it's, it's for free.
So many beautiful limes, lemons, pomelos, grapefruit and mandarins.
Yeah, and this is my first time actually being in Far North Queensland. Ebony's has given me a little bit of a tour around and it's a beautiful place. I really love Cairns because I'm staying in Cairns. I'm loving the weather, loving the atmosphere, loving the growers, loving the Akubra hats.
Well, it's not a lot to love about Far North Queensland, Gabs. We've got it all.
I'm moving here. There's going to be a Citrus Australia Mareeba division.
I mean, I'm not biased, but Queensland definitely is the best state by far.
Okay.
We have the best fishing, the best camping, and of course the best citrus.
I think that's if I was to move to Mareeba, Queensland, I wouldn't come for the fishing. That would actually be something I'd stay away from. So, Evs, could you do me the honour of introducing our guests and the theme of this month's episode?
I'd love to. So, this episode is focusing on the Imperial Mandarin harvest season here in Queensland. It marks the beginning of citrus season in the hope that our listeners might gain insights into their own upcoming production, but also something extra on a research project hoping to uncover some practical instruction for combating granulation. Joining us on the podcast is Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries Senior Horticulturalist Helen Hoffman, Red Rich Fruits Farming Operations Manager Tim Teague, and Gander grower Matt Benham.
Let's get into it. Hi Matt, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, well, thanks Gabby. Yourself?
Not as busy as you are at the moment. What's been keeping you occupied on the farm?
Right, I say we're into the thick of the Imperials at the moment, and I'm still ticking on for a few lemons and not far away from the start of our early export varieties.
Oh wow, so you've got the shed running, the orchard is bustling from what you can see so far. What's the Imperial Mandarin harvest going? How is it going?
Quality and volume is certainly up from last year. Last year's crop was subpar. There was a lot of quality issues and just general blemish and whatnot, and the quantities were down a little bit. This year, the quantities probably, it's just a good average amount. The quality is far, far better. It's some of the best quality I've seen in probably quite a while, but movement is slow. We were a late start. Probably by a couple of weeks, but as the volumes increased, the demand came back pretty quickly. So There's a few people sort of pulled up harvesting at the moment, waiting for a bit of stock to clear off the markets, and hopefully we can then finish off with a bit of a stronger finish.
Is it a high bearing year this year, or is it a low one?
I'd say it'll be on the higher end of the scale. As I said, it's sort of a good, just above average. I wouldn't say it's a bumper crop, but it's certainly above average.
And so there's been a few difficult years with labour, but how is that side looking for you this season?
It's certainly improved since. This will be the best year we've had since before COVID. Last year was certainly improved on the previous year, but those first couple of years were certainly very tough when we initially lost the backpackers and whatever else, but no, our contractors got us well sorted this year for staff, and there's a few backpackers back on the phone again looking around for jobs, so that's refreshing. So no, vast improvement. It's just costing a bit more to do the job with the same people, with the top ups and whatever else that have been brought in, so that's making things a lot more expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. But I agree with you. It is so refreshing to have those backpackers back in the community. Even like you go grocery shopping, you hear like 10 different languages. Someone's yelling about something in French and you're just like, oh, you're a backpacker. Welcome back.
That's it, yeah.
So when is the season looking like it's wrapping up in Queensland? Is it a short season compared to normal in Queensland or a long one?
No, I'd say it's probably going to be a bit longer than usual. With the slowdown and movement of the Imperials, I mean, with that little bit extra crop we were talking about, along with that slower movement, I mean, we've handled these volumes well before. It's not so much based around that. I think the problem is there's just generally less fruit getting sold, whether it's to do with interest rates or inflation, whatever it is. But there's certainly there's less demand around. So I would say that's probably, to get through the crop and move it, I'd say that the Imperials will probably run a week or two longer than we would normally expect, just because of the slower movement of sales.
Yeah.
And then in saying that, as I said, we were later start, but colour-wise, we've had some. Well, this would be the earliest cold we've had in this area for quite a few years. So there's the early mid-season varieties. The colour has really moved on them. So externally, they're maturing quite quickly. Internally, they're probably on par, just on a standard, but externally, they're certainly moving quite quickly. So yeah, we'll kick into our day. So they're looking really good quality, external, internal, and the colours right up there. So. But even that, I'd say the later varieties, they'll extend out just because of the volumes that are around. And
is there anything you're seeing this season which might help give an indication of how the rest of the season might be for growers elsewhere?
I don't know. As I said, like the compared to where we've been the last year and the year before, as far as overall quality goes, the fruit is. I mean, I can only speak on the behalf of our place, but it's The fruit seems good and firm, the very little blemish. And because of the extra load and like early season, we had a lot of cloud and whatever else, so we're probably a little bit behind in size. But other than that, I'm not seeing any major, pre or post harvest issues arising like we've seen, especially last year. So no, things seem a little bit more. Hopefully, it's a bit smoother running than the previous year.
Yeah, let's hope so as well. Is there anything else you would like our listeners to know, or anything I've forgotten to ask?
Oh, I don't think so, Gab. I think you covered it pretty well. No, we just got to hope that that we get a bit more domestic movement with these domestic varieties, that sales pick up a little bit. And it seems to be across all categories, not just citrus, from what I'm hearing. So we're not the only ones in the boat. So and then I guess on the other hand of that, we just export does seem positive from early indications. There's a bit more buoyancy in the global market, so compared to what we've seen. So hopefully that can be the flip side of what's happening on the domestic side of things.
Well, thank you so much for joining me in the podcast, especially in the middle of your busy season, Matt. I'm very grateful, so make sure you take care of yourself for the rest of the season.
Oh, good on you, Gabby. No worries. Thanks, eh?
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Hello and welcome to the podcast, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, well, thanks, Gabby. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Where are you today for our listeners?
So I'm in Gayndah, about 15 minutes outside of town on our Mount Lawless orchard.
And how long have you been around this kind of stuff in this citrus industry? How did you come into it?
So I've worked for Red Ridge for about 12 years. I was based in Sydney and based in the Sydney markets. When Red Ridge did their expansion into buying farms and sourcing fruit direct, my career shifted to involve working operationally on the farms in Queensland and the Northern Territory.
Oh, that's right, because you have mangoes in the NT, don't you?
Correct, that's right.
And I've seen you've been really busy on social media informing consumers about the quality of Imperial mandarins this season. Outside of work, do you spend much time on social media? Do you have any addictive videos you like to watch?
Not overly, Gabby. Social media has become a necessary evil. I think it's a platform that provides a lot of opportunities for any interest group to get their message out there, and I like a lot of other people can be extremely uncomfortable on camera and in these situations. However, it's part of the world we now live in.
Yeah, well, I'm quite surprised by that. My dad, he doesn't know how to text pictures to people. He doesn't know how to turn the computer on. He doesn't understand what data and all that sort of stuff is, but he'll sit on his phone for maybe an hour without realizing he's done it, and he just loves watching clips from The Voice on Facebook on his feed. And it's haven't you got better things to do, Dad?
Given the amount of short videos that we've done for like Facebook and Instagram in regards to seasonal issues or information that we provide, it gets a little bit cringy to see oneself on camera. I try to get off there as quick as I can.
Yep. You're avoiding social media just in case you see yourself and have to. Pretty much. Well, let's get into the real reason you're here. Talking about the Imperial Mandarin season, thinking of cause and effect. If seasonal conditions are the cause, what effect has it had on this year's crop?
We've had a pretty good crop this year. Size has been down a little bit because of the size of the crop. And also because of the late cooler weather that we had coming into the start of the season. The late warmer weather. So the crop didn't get its full opportunity to size up as much as it could. But since the season started, we've had ideal conditions. So we've had cooler nights, warm days. The fruit's been allowed to mature properly. We haven't had really any issues with skin damage or blemish that's been a cause of weather since the season started. So we're really well placed. Brix has been high also. So I think we're providing a good product for consumers.
And are there any challenges you've faced so far?
Price in the market would be the most significant challenge we've faced. Given that most growers in the region were late, did not start harvesting until Easter or just after, most of us landed fruit in the central markets at a similar time, which created a bit of a glut and put a lot of pressure on price.
Do you know, so Red Rich Fruits is quite a large operation. Is this going to be a long or short season for you guys? How much longer do you have to go?
I think it'll be fairly normal. I think Imperials will start to wind up at the end of May, start of June. Then we'll begin our mid-season honeybee and Murcott varieties that should run until at least the end of August, if not into September.
Is there anything you can do about market prices, when you've coincidentally picked all at the same time because of seasonal conditions? Is there a way, obviously you can't just not pick the fruit, so do you just have to put up with prices because of the not oversupply, but yeah.
You're right, Gabby. Fruit doesn't wait. So, you can stage picking to a degree, but realistically, you want to get it off. You need to get it off at a pace which suits businesses operationally. What we can do, I think a lot of us have started a lot more social media engagement. We're engaging with local news sources where possible. We're definitely not the only business that I've seen a higher level of engagement this year in regards to Channel 7, ABC, The Country Hour, those sort of platforms. And I think the more information that you get out there, then you are educating the consumer and giving them an opportunity to support Aussie farmers. And I think that's where it starts.
So you've kind of answered my next question, which is, what is the value in getting the message across, not to industry, but to consumers, about growing conditions of fruit and what's in season and the quality?
I think these days, if you can put a human face in addition to the offer provided from growing regions, you're giving the consumer an opportunity to connect with the fruit they're buying. And I think the better connection you have, the more likely that they are to support Australian growers. And I think that's what we really need.
Is there anything else you would like to add about anything going on, any messages you would like our grower listeners to hear from you guys, or anything I forgot to ask?
I think ongoing communication in regards to where and when shoppers will find the best quality and value is the best message we can get out there in order to drive demand, which will ultimately help influence sales and give a better return to growers. I think that's really where the focus needs to be.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Tim. I understand that it's raining today, so you've been able to have a little break and talk to me and talk to our listeners as well. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a good luck with the rest of your season as well.
Thanks very much, Gabby. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Bye. Hello and welcome to the podcast, Helen.
Thank you.
You're joining me over the phone all the way from Bundaberg, Queensland. How's Queensland? How's Bundaberg?
Actually, it's a bit grey and overcast today. It's been fairly wet autumn, surprisingly. But anyway,
Anyway.
It's nice and cool. You probably don't like that in the south, but we like it when it's cool up here.
I was thinking, something about being cold, like in the Mallee, is just not a good combination for people who've just grown up in dry heat scenarios. Now, you're just finishing a report on this project you've been working on, exploring grower management practices to reduce granulation in Imperial mandarins, a physiological disorder which results in dry and tasteless fruit. So how long have you been working in this space?
Actually, I've been working on it on and off for about 10 years now. There was an earlier project also on the same topic, and then there was a bit of a gap in research due to lack of funding, and then I'd started this project again about 5 years ago. Initially, it was just funded by a couple of growers, and then Hort Innovation started funding it 3 years ago. So all in all, this particular project covers about 4 years of trials.
And can you give our listeners an overview of what your project is and its goals?
Okay, essentially it is about trying to reduce granulation in Imperial mandarins, looking at farm management practices. Imperials are a variety that are particularly prone to granulation. We think because they're a very early citrus fruit and they develop really quickly. And so of all the varieties, they've been the most problematical, although other varieties can suffer from granulation as well. So the project is focused on on-farm trials. There's not much work in laboratory. And we've looked at a whole range of things: irrigation, nitrogen nutrition, late pruning. We tried girdling of branches in spring, and we've tried a whole range of plant growth regulators. We've also tried in the project to get a better physiological understanding of what's going on, largely by looking at flush growth and how that impacts on granulation.
That's Yeah,
enough of a summary?
that's a pretty good summary. And it's interesting that you kind of mentioned how growers sort of started the project and the whole innovation took it on board. Is that just purely because growers saw it as an issue and wanted research done in this space, and there hadn't been anything previously done about it?
Not so much that there hadn't been anything previously done, but it's an ongoing problem, and it's a very difficult one for growers to manage because you can't really manage it in the packing line because you can't tell from the outside whether fruit are granulated or not. With other problems like fruit fly stings or whatever, you can pick them up through visual inspection in the packing line. But with this, the fruit look perfect, and they weigh much the same as non-granulated fruit. So it's really difficult for them to manage. It varies from year to year and from block to block and from tree to tree. And even on the one tree, there's a whole range of different levels of granulation in the fruit. So it's really very tricky for them to manage. So they need a lot of help.
And so you found 3 key things for growers to focus on in trying to reduce granulation. What are they?
Yes, that's right. So some of the things we tried, we didn't have much success in. I'll just mention that quickly. The plant growth regulators and the girdling, and even the late pruning didn't get us very far. But we have found that the 3 key things, and probably not in order of importance, they're all important, reducing irrigation, making sure you have adequate nitrogen nutrition, and managing your crop load. So probably, do you want me to talk a little bit more about each of those?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, great. So reducing irrigation has probably been the most effective in the last few years. And it's very important because a lot of growers think because the fruit are dry, you need to give them more water. And in fact, it's the opposite. Our hypothesis is that at a physiological level, fruit granulate because they're high in water potential, which essentially means that the fruit juice cells are turgid and or they're low in solutes. And so the 2 key things that affect that are obviously irrigation and nutrition. So if you over-irrigate, you get more turgid juice cells early in fruit development, and that tends to lead to granulation. So by reducing irrigation, and it seems early in fruit development is the most important stage, although all through the season will help, you can get less granulated fruit. So with the nutrition, in the first project, we tried a whole range of different nutritional elements, and we found that the nitrogen was the one that had really the only effect. At that stage, growers were reducing their nitrogen applications to try and get earlier colour in their fruit and get their fruit onto the market early. And this is a bad thing for granulation. It's really important for growers to apply sufficient nitrogen in winter to build up the stores of carbohydrates and elements in the tree to support the spring flush.
Yeah.
So with Imperials, because they develop so quickly, there's a lot of competition in early fruit set and early fruit growth between the flush and the fruit. And if they don't have sufficient stores in the tree to support that, you will get more granulation. So we've tried a range of strategies of different levels of nitrogen to support that fruit development, and essentially the more the better, well, up to the recommended level of nitrogen per tree, which is about 700 to 800 grams of nitrogen per tree, depending on the age of the tree. And the third thing is managing crop load. This has been interesting because in recent years, growers in the Central Burnett, where I mostly work, have had a lot of labour issues due to the pandemic. And so thinning of crops has been one of the things that they've had to let go. They just don't have enough staff. And so the crops of Imperials have started to become much more biennial. And it's really obvious that with a low crop load, which we had not this year but the year before, very high levels of granulation with a low crop load. And with high crop loads, there's a bit of a protection against granulation. So managing your crop load by thinning when the fruit are reasonably mature and not picking too late are probably the two key things growers need to manage to get good crops every year.
So do this year's seasonal conditions give any indication of there potentially being granulation?
Yes, it's been interesting this year in the Burnett because we had a very cold winter last year, and so there was a very heavy flowering, very intense flowering, and so most growers have got high crop loads, and that's normally a protection against granulation. But we've also had a very wet year, particularly spring was quite wet, and that tends to cause granulation. So there will be some growers, particularly ones that are overwatering, where there will still be issues with granulation. But overall, because of the high crop loads, it should be a relatively good year, much better than the year before where most people had low crop loads.
Yeah.
So it's quite complex, the things that interact. But if you can manage crop load and irrigation and feed your trees properly, that'll minimise the problems.
Yeah, and the Imperial Mandarin harvest is basically in full swing right now. And you said yourself you've gone out and bought some Imperials and they're tasting pretty good. I'm yet to go to the shops and do my first Mandarin buy. But if growers are finding granulation or might find granulation, I don't know, and they're not happy with what they're seeing, where will they be able to find further support to try and find these techniques or talk to someone to help them solve these issues for the next season if they need it?
Well, I'm always happy to take personal calls from growers and I can give you those contact details. But we are preparing just a short set of guidelines for growers, which covers in a bit more detail than what I've said here, the issues that they should manage, and that will be available through my department, the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries in Queensland, but hopefully also through Citrus Australia publications.
Yeah.
And also for those who really want all the details, there will be a final report for the project, which will be available through the normal or innovation website where you can get all copies of these final reports electronically.
Well, thank you so much for that. If you're a grower listening, you're not sure what granulation is or what's all the science behind it, I'll leave some resources in the link of this podcast as well. And thank you so much, Helen, for joining me today on the Full Bottle podcast and helping us understand a little bit about granulation and management and your project. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon and stay warm.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into this month's episode, everyone. And thank you, Ebony, so much for joining us. Any last word to our listeners before I fly back to the miserable cold Victoria?
Happy harvesting, everyone, and eat more Aussie citrus because it's delicious.
Yeah. Once again, thank you for listening. We're always after feedback, so please click the link in the podcast description and have a great time. We also now have the podcast streaming on YouTube for any desktop listeners. From the packing shed, orchard, tractor, car, or office, I'm happy to have kept you company. Keep it juicy, guys. Bye.
Bye.